we look at linear from yesterday, and this is actually J4, it was f of x equal to x. That's our traditional, our apparent linear. Absolute value, we were thinking of f of x equal to absolute value of x. And our quadratic was f of x was equal to x squared. When you are moving up and down, we were then always talking about if it's inside the parenthesis, right? Or if it is outside of that parenthesis or outside of that absolute value, okay? So when you look at those, you're always kind of trying to compare, is it inside or outside that parenthesis, or if we are looking at it, the absolute value. When it is outside, that's when it is moving it up and down. When it is inside, that's when it moves it left and right. So when you are looking at it being inside, that moves it left and right, and outside, that parenthesis or absolute value moves it up and down. So you will see on the test questions where I ask you to move the parent function from the parent function, move it 3 units up and 2 to the left, or something along that line. So here's your answer as we are looking at this one. So if you did these, I know the answers are not in the back, so I just want you to have a quick look at what you were doing for those. And if you still have questions, I want to answer those, but I'm going to move this so you can see all of that. I'll move it down in a minute. One of the first standards for the 19 questions, the first standard is going to be that I can add, I can subtract, and I can multiply polynomials. So what I am looking for is your answer to be in standard form. That means from the largest power, right, from x cubed to x squared to x, so in standard form. When we are looking at this and it says write that polynomial by add, subtract, and multiply, there should be no parentheses anywhere in the problem, right? Because if you had two things being multiplied, like x minus 2 times x plus 2, your goal is to eliminate the parentheses. Right? So the next section we'll talk about, there are 4 questions. Okay? So 4 questions in that first one that we're going to be looking at. The next thing that will be on that first day of the final, the next section of questions, will be that I can rewrite a polynomial. So when we rewrite our polynomial, and this time when we rewrite the polynomial, we're going to look at it a bit, rewrite polynomial by factoring. So this time you want parentheses. So when I look at your answer on this part, this is where you might use that AC. This is where you might have your 2 parentheses. So you're not solving yet. All you're doing is writing the 2 parentheses being multiplied. Okay, so remember that was back a while. There will be 4 questions on this. Okay, so this was our unit before our quadratics we solved, and the unit before that we were factoring doing these. So unit H, I believe that is going to be, if you're thinking this is unit H. Okay. If I am looking at the next standard, this is where we are going to be looking at, I can convert expressions between exponential and radical. Oh, yeah. I can convert between exponential, right? That's when we have an exponent with it, and radical. Radical is when we have the square root, might be a cube root, might be a 4th root, right? And then when we write it in exponential form, it's like x to the half, right? That's what this one is. If I have x under here, That's my radical form. Then I got to change it to exponential. And you'll also be asked to simplify with that. Meaning if you have x to the second times x to the half, you want to simplify it to x. So there will be 5 questions on that. Okay? 5 questions on that one. And use equations. Use equations to model. And solve. We got to create them, we got to solve, like we did in the last one, real world problems. Now, second semester, we didn't do a lot of linear ones. We kind of focused on exponential this semester, and we focused on quadratic. So if there's 4 questions, probably 2 exponential ones, right? Probably 2 quadratic ones when we're looking at that. Remember, in exponential, you can have growth. That's when you're multiplying, your value is going to be a number greater than 1, or you are probably going to have decay. Probably going to have 1 of each. In your quadratic, what did we just do on the last test? We looked at the quadratic of finding the maximum height. We also looked at the time to get to the maximum. Besides maximum height, we also found the 0 value when you had to solve it. You might have used a quadratic, you might have used factoring. So that's what I'm going to be looking at. Now, you won't have to create every single one. I believe you create both your exponentials, but I believe I give you one of the quadratics. And then the other one, you got to go with the velocity like we did on that last one. So they're right next to each other, so kind of look at the other quadratic to help you out when you're doing that, right? The last standard that we solve systems of equations. That's why we didn't have a test on this as part of the final. Graphically, and algebraically. Now, when you solve it algebraically, I do not care if you use elimination or if you use substitution. When you do it graphically, remember the linear, you should be able to do that straight line. And then for your quadratic, you need the vertex first. It's super easy if I give you an equation like y equals x squared minus 3, right? Because the vertex is at 0, negative 3. But if I have an equation like y equals x squared and it is plus 2x minus 5, when I graph this one, I have to find my x value going negative b over 2a, and then I find my new y value, right? So I have to compute those values if I have a middle term. Some of you found this one to be harder in the homework. You're like, how do I do it when there's no b? That's even easier, right? That is your, like going off your parent function, it just moved it down 3 as you look at them, okay? So we got the day 1, day 2. Oh, you remember those changing between exponential? This is day 1, right? Oh, change between exponential and radical. So that whole page, looking at that standard. Systems, day 1, right? These are all your systems graphing. There will be one systems graphing. There will be one system of, next page, algebraic. And again, they don't tell you which way algebraic, right? So the solving systems through 40, that's all day 1. Okay? This is looking like day 2, right? We didn't talk about it, right? Day 2. Right? Simplifying your radical. Graphing, exponential, and so these aren't like the real world problems, right? So the graphing part, that's probably day 2, because we didn't talk about that. Day 2. When we get, do you have any solving? No, this is all day 2. I think the rest of it, except for here, the real world, places day 1. 77 to not this part, to 86, 87. Okay, 86. That's going to be day 1, right? Those are my real world problems, right? This is where you have 2 quadratics and 2 exponentials. And then I believe the rest of it is day 2. That's your Pythagorean. And this is moving it up and down like we were just talking about. How does it change the vertex? That's also day 2. Okay? So this last one's day 2. Okay? So, as much as you can, you want to try and look at the day 1 final stuff. So like if you're really struggling with this part of writing those sort problems and coming up with that. And some of you on the test misunderstood when you had to find vertex and when you had to find the 0. So when you read the problem, you want to, what are the keywords that you know I'm finding the 0 or I'm finding the other value, okay? Finding the vertex. So, again, we're not doing any of the solving. So, as you look at the repeat,